Welcome everybody, this is Dusty Circuit here, and this is now episode 4 of all the projects that I've built on Autcraft, and we're on a roll, and we've covered about, my first 2 bases, and my first community farms. And in this episode, we're going to talk about another farm that I have built on Autcraft. This while we're on this topic of farms. And the reason why this is getting its own episode is because it was a pretty big project in of itself. And of course, it was definitely one of the first 3 large projects I did on Autcraft that wasn't a base per se. This was a guardian farm, and this was actually a project that actually ModKiller kind of got me to start doing, because he actually had seen a guardian farm that was kind of similar to this design that that MMPF had built, and he really wanted to get to building one like his, but kind of we do put our own twist on it, I guess. And this is kind of what I've come up with, and this took about I'd say a few weeks to a month, or I'd say probably a couple weeks to get it like functional per se, and about a month or 2 to get it like actually like looking good to what you see it as right now. And I did, as you can see, I have recreated this build in my creative world, but I do also have plenty of screenshots of it, which I'm gonna show in the video as well. And so first, I might just talk a little bit about some history of this build. I have, of course, how it went was me and ModKiller saw MMPF's farm, and of course he really liked the design, and he really, I guess he just got really excited, and he wanted us to do the same project. And at the time, I was like, yeah, let's do it, because of course, this is when 1.8 was fairly new to the server. And I think actually 1.8 kind of came out not too long ago. And I have one thing to say about it. Out of all of the Minecraft updates, at least that I've kind of witnessed in my time playing Minecraft, 1.8 has to have had the longest development cycle of like any Minecraft updates to this day. Like I swear, like it's went on for several months, like probably around like 3/4 of a year or so, and I don't think any other Minecraft update had even come near to that. And like, just to kind of give perspective, the time I lost my survival world was kind of when the 1.8 snapshots were first, like when the first few snapshots came out, and kind of in the time 1.8 was still in development, I had kind of I had joined Autcraft and played on Autcraft, I think probably a month or so, and then 1.8 finally released, and like it was out a while, and I think it probably wasn't until like a few months into my first year on Autcraft that the server finally updated. Or I think actually it might have even been kind of early on that it was able to update. But anyway, well, if anyone's watching the video wants to correct me in the comments, feel free. But anyway, I kind of was too excited about this project because Guardian farms, to me, even to this day, are kind of a valuable farm to have in survival mode because it's an XP farm, and in fact actually a pretty good XP farm. I think actually Guardians drop the same amount of XP as Blaze do. And they also drop fish, which isn't really the best of food sources, but it is a free food source that you would gain access to from building a Guardian farm. And they also would drop the prismarine shards and the prismarine crystals, which I like when the ocean monuments were first added. I really kind of like the look of the blocks, and especially the sea lanterns I liked a lot because it's like this very kind of clean, modern looking block that basically fits in to almost any that really could fit into almost any build style. And it's like I basically fell in love with the sea lanterns enough that I would actually build a guardian farm in survival mode just so I can get tons of sea lanterns. And that was kind of my thought process in building this farm, as well as this kind of peer pressure from Mod Killer. But I mean, I wasn't complaining. We were great friends by that time, even though we haven't of course we haven't gotten into Skype yet, and Discord wasn't even a thing yet, and of course we were still talking in chat, like in-game text chat. And of course, here is some screenshots I took actually in the construction of the Guardian farm, and as you can see, I basically just kind of course, this would have been after I cleared out the 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 the, the, the ocean monument itself, but think I would have used sponges to remove that, and I think I would have used sponges and like a combination of sponges and like building like walls like with sand or other rocks to make removal of the water easier. But then after that, I built this beacon that you can see here in the picture, and then I started digging out the ground beneath it so that I could have the pit where all the guardians would fall to their death. And as you can see, there's a lot of mobs spawning here, which also brought my hopes up that this guardian farm would be very efficient. And of course, this was MMPF's farm. And Here's just kind of a view of the farm when I first started placing in the whole layer of fence gates to keep the water up. And how I actually went around building this, I pretty much just drained out the area first, and then I put in the fence gates, then I flooded it afterwards. And then that, in hindsight, that actually wasn't a very good idea, because when basically if you were to flood this big of an area, it's going to cause some lag, and I think it was kind of funny. Like I actually like how I did it was I placed like columns of ice along one of the walls, and then like I think I put ice all along here and then here, I think. And then I broke all the ice with a non-silk touch pickaxe, and silk touch is the way you pick up ice in the first place. And basically this whole area just flooded in all at once, and I think actually, of course, Modkiller kind of experienced it at the time. I think it was both me and Modkiller on the server at the time, and I think it even actually. I don't know if it crashed the server or it just made the server restart, but it was kind of actually kind of funny, or at least at the time, that it basically kind of lagged the. Well, of course, it wasn't good that we lagged the server, but it was anyway. Uh, at the time, that's just kind of how we did this. But anyway, we ended up getting the area flooded in. Mm. And also, I ran into some lava lakes, and how I dealt with that is I actually would put what I would basically would infill them with gravel so that I could just remove the gravel, because that was just easier than flooding it with water and mining up the obsidian. And as you can see, I even placed pistons down to help with putting the gravel in. And that's actually some of the ice from when I was flooding the farm. And of course, that's the farm when the water was finally filled in. There's kind of another thing about this farm. It's basically kind of the behavior of guardians is it's like basically they would attack any squid that would spawn. And kind of due to that, this would also double as an ink sac farm. And I actually got tons of ink from this. Like I probably got like it's definitely probably tens of double chests full. That's kind of a view from below when the farm was flooded in with water. And here's kind of course, underneath the farm. And I also kind of ran into some slime chunks when I was making this, and I actually had to kind of put slabs over them, but I eventually, when I put the rails over the entire farm, that stopped the slime spawning anyway. And thought I'd kind of mention this. I actually used diorite in the walls for this build because at this time, of course, I had built the second base, I think, by this point, but for kind of this farm and for also for a few other projects, I decided to actually rather just use kind of the materials I got from digging out basically just resources that I got from doing the project, and kind of putting the diorite in the walls was just kind of my way of reusing materials. And it's kind of like I find a lot of people hate diorite just because of it's like a very noisy texture that just doesn't look very good. And but I think like with any block in the game, if you use it in the right ways, it actually can look good, at least in my opinion. And at the time, I just kind of passed it off as kind of a cheap alternative to nether quartz, like for my builds. And this tunnel basically kind of led to the storage room. And of course, that was, of course, as you can see, I'm currently standing on one of the slabbed areas that I had to, like one of the slime chunks that I had to slab over. And also some of the rails are in place. And yes, I actually did replace the entire floor with polished andesite because I didn't really have to, because this entire area was going to be covered over with rails. But and it was just kind of another way of just reusing materials. Anyway, here, this is the storage room, which is pretty big. And anyway, here's kind of, well, since we actually have this replica of the farm in my creative world, I could actually demonstrate this working. And this is basically how the farm would operate. It was pretty much this entire floor where I would just have hopper minecarts moving back and forth, collecting all the drops. And I really kind of enjoyed using this farm just because I found that very satisfying to watch all the minecarts move back and forth. And actually, I got a lot of loot from this farm, and I mean a lot. Like, just basically from the amount of time I've been running it in this creative world, I've gotten this much shards and this much crystals and this much fish. Didn't get that much ink, but from what I've heard, the squid spawning rates kind of changed since 1.8, or like when this I did this farm. But anyway, basically how this would work is, of course, there's the minecarts. That was weird. But anyway, so basically I had this entire area where it was basically just like hoppers leading from each unloading station. And basically how the unloading stations work is you basically have a comparator that would detect when items would enter the would leave the minecart, and it would basically unpower the rail, and it would just stop the minecart there until it's empty, and then it would get sent off again. And I think I also had like a redstone going to all of these so I could shut off the minecarts whenever I'm not using the farm. And like some people I guess would just leave the minecarts running continuously, but from what I find the minecarts would tend to, like if I leave the area when the minecarts are moving, sometimes minecarts would just get stuck. I guess just because the chunks would unload at different rates, and basically whenever I was not using the farm, I would just switch that lever off. And I basically just had those hoppers go all the way down here, and had a big item elevator that would take the items all the way up to the top of the storage room. And I didn't necessarily have to make the storage room this big, but I guess I just kind of was expecting that I was going to be AFKing the farm a lot, and I think I may have even had plans that I was going to sell some of the loot that I was going to get from this farm, but that never panned out. And I also would have had a ladder going up through the center of this, but I guess I just didn't get to building that in this world. Well, on Autcraft I actually had a ladder climbing up because I didn't have fly like I do right now. And I believe I even eventually converted this farm into like a base of sorts even, and I think at one point I even also built like an auto brewing system. I think because later on in at a point later on, Ninjago actually wanted to convert this farm into like an actual XP farm where you kill the guardians manually. And I'm thinking that was when mob heads were first introduced, and Ninjago really wanted to collect mob heads. And kind of to do that, what I did is I just built like a giant just funnel. So basically the guardians would fall, and then they would just move down the funnel, and then they'd eventually go into a killing area that would have been like dead in the center, right here, where you would kill the guardians manually. And I actually had, I believe it was an auto brewing system for Splash Potions of Harming, because, of course, this was before Sweeping Edge, and there was this trick in the game, which I guess was technically a glitch, and I don't know if it's still in the game, but it's where, like, if you're if you throw like a splash potion, either of harming or healing, the thing is, healing actually would do damage to undead mobs like zombies, skeletons, and that, but harming would do damage to all the other mobs. And if you throw a potion and all the mobs would die, but you actually switch to a sword with looting 3 on before the potion hits, the looting effect would basically be applied to the kill without you having to use the sword. Which I actually used to use a lot in my older XP farms, but including a lot of an XP. I even had a gold farm on the single player world that I lost, and that of course where I used that trick. And of course nowadays I just use sweeping edge to kind of get that same effect. But anyway, that auto brewer was pretty complicated. It had a lot of redstone to make it work, but it worked. And the reason I at least had fun building it, designing it, and getting it to work. And this farm went on to be a very successful project, and it basically lived on up until the map reset, and that was the only reason this farm went out of use. And of course by that time I actually had accumulated so much, like a ton of loot in that storage system, and in fact I think I even got up to, I think it was like one entire row all the way up, and probably half of the second row was full of ink sacs. And well, in fact, AFKing is technically not allowed on Autcraft because, well, there's an AFK timer where if you're idle for longer than 15 minutes, you would be kicked off the server. And basically, and some players even found that you could get around that by building what's called an AFK pool, which is basically like basically like a small area with a water stream that would push you around in a circle, and the server would still regard that as activity, and we would effectively be able to bypass the AFK kick that way. And later on in my time on Autcraft, I kind of became guilty of even building a few of those, because I went through a time where I thought that if I would just do it inconspicuously, I'd be able to get away with it. But of course, eventually I did get caught, and staff wasn't too happy with me. And although most of the time I would just AFK, as I call it, semi-AFK. Like I wouldn't use an AFK machine, but what I would do is basically I would just kind of sit, like in the case of this farm, I would just kind of have my players sit here and and then I'd pull up like a YouTube video or something else that I wanted to do, and I don't know, like every 12 minutes, 14 minutes, I would move my player just to bypass the just to reset the timer so I don't get kicked. And I think I even told like there was a command called /AFK that would kind of trigger you into being AFK, and if you do it again, you'd be not AFK. And if you actually did that command twice, that would also reset the timer. And though most of the time I would just kind of move myself just so the game would regard me as not AFK. And for the most part, I was able to get away with that just fine. Although one day an admin confront me just simply for talking about it, and it ended up in a whole big kind of argument that ended up with me maybe. It just wasn't pretty, but of course I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, and I think that's it anyway for another video, or might not talk about it. Or anyway, it's kind of a sore subject, but anyway. This farm was very successful, and even by the time that I would have so by the time that actually the world reset was kind of was near, there even was this kind of joke going around where, like, of course, I think at the time they had a plugin that would clear items, like, that had been laying on the ground, like, I think it was after 2 minutes or something. And then I think, I don't remember if it was because of that, or if it was, just the server was acting strange again, but there kind of was even this joke started on the forums where, of course, it was relaying to the server, referring to Bessie again, and I think it was like, well, some players would like, well, if Bessie misbehaves, giving her ink sacs to eat. And it's like with they just like would drop ink sacs on the ground, and I guess the joke was Bessie would get the ink sacs, and by that time I actually had like probably like definitely probably around 15 double chests full of ink sacs, and I was even considering like breaking all those chests and just seeing what would happen, or even just kind of for a joke, like to post on the forums or whatever. But I then go but I didn't do that because that would have been that would have gotten laggy fast, and it would I definitely would have dropped probably I would have definitely have dropped to like probably 10 frames per second or lower by the end, and I wouldn't be surprised if it would also affect the servers a little bit as well. And I ended up not doing that. And but before the world resets, I think me, Modcore, and Ninjago actually did save quite a bit of the loot from this farm, and I think we even scrapped out some of the redstone and like and kind of other things of the farm that we could save for other projects. And that was just kind of more or less the end of it. And I don't really have much else to say other than this was a highly successful project, and the really didn't really nothing went wrong at all. And in fact, this is one of the few farms or projects that of a really big scale that I would have done on Autcraft that were not problematic in any way. And I would definitely have kept this farm longer if it not have been for the world reset. And uh yeah. But anyway, this has been Dusty Circuit. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Remember to rate, comment, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for episode 5 of this series. Bye.